The subject of today's video, the Macintosh Performa 635. So, hello everybody. My name is Bitpusher. I am an 8-bit and bass music wannabe a producer, but today on my nifty little channel I'm talking about something totally not related and doing something very special for me. I will be performing a little, or at least what I call necromancy, on my middle school Macintosh, which was the Performa 635. Just to lay this out right from the get-go for anyone, any vintage Mac enthusiasts and stuff that might be watching. This is not an educational video. It's not a how-to video. It's not a reference video. I'm not going to be demonstrating step-by-steps of how I do things, because this is more of a vlog type of video for myself, sort of a memory-keeping thing. I hadn't originally planned on even making a video out of this. I had been, from when I started, I had been just taking, progress pictures that I was going to keep in my photo library for myself and leave it at that. But this is just such a special thing that about partway through, I got my internal cleaning and all that done, which I'll show you some pictures of that shortly. But I decided to go ahead and say, what the hell, and make a video out of it and have some fun. So through the power of movie magic, these things will move and happen mighty quickly. But the truth is, I am just going to be doing this in bits and pieces over time. I'm waiting for some different things to arrive in the mail. Christmas is coming up soon, so that'll probably occupy some time. I can't wait to give my daughter her present. But regardless, yeah. So why am I doing this? Just something I want to say or want to talk about with this is that I'm very nostalgic. I'm approaching my 40s and not quite there yet, but I've always really been a very, just a kind of a lonely, depressed person. I mean, I really am just wired that way. I rarely feel happy and charged and things like that. That's just not my normal nature, truth be told. But I've always, since I was little, had a real love of technology and computers. My kindergarten, in fact, was the first. We shared the building with the elementary school, but our building was the first in the entire city to get a computer, which happened to be a big green screen Apple IIe. Ever since touching a computer, it's just been one of my obsessions, even as a little kid. I got the Performa 635, was the model of Macintosh I was gifted for my birthday when I was just a middle school kid. And it of course was my best friend. I had a Mac SE or SE30, one of the two, when I was like 5, 6 somewhere. I don't remember that one as well. I just remember the lines across the bottom. It was cut into the case, that design. But regardless, though, this Mac is my first real love. I remember spending stupid amounts of hours doing stuff on this machine, on the 635. So to bring it back to life with, I mean, as is, although extremely filthy and nasty, it ran. The old hard drive and everything that was in it even worked. But I'm performing a series of upgrades and refreshes and a lot of cleaning and bringing this old girl back to life. This has been a pain in the ass so far. Not stupidly costly, but it's investing a bit and getting some of the parts and things that I need to do what I want to do. This is absolutely a labor of love for me. Doing this type of thing is kind of my element. It's a place where I'm actually happy. To as much as I love this machine, as much fondness as I have for this particular Macintosh, doing this just makes my heart very happy. And I'm sorry if that's cringy, that's the best way I can say it. This is exciting for me. Like I said, it just really makes me happy. So I'm just going to record video clips as I go along over time here as my stuff arrives in the mail, and demonstrate what I'm doing. And at the end of this, I'm looking forward to recording a video of firing it up with the new drive, putting a solid state drive in and all that, and getting it going. A few things I will not be doing just to get this out of the way. One, fortunately, I don't need to recap it. As far as I can tell, these caps are all perfectly flat topped and healthy. I don't know how to recap. I don't know how to solder. I've never held a soldering gun, let alone tried to solder on a circuit board. So that's not happening. Fortunately, it doesn't need to. If any of them remotely look to me like they did, I would probably have to pay out the ass, but I would be looking at some local computer shops and find out someone that knows how to solder and getting that done. Because electrolytic capacitors leaking is like death. It's a ticking time bomb for any electronics. So perfectly healthy in that regard, even the power supply, and I'm very thrilled about that. So there won't be any recapping going on. Number two is retrobrighting. For those that don't know what that is, it's apparently some sort, I've never touched it, never seen it myself, but it's, other than videos, it's apparently some kind of a compound or a chemical that you slather on all the plastic components of old yellow, or old white or beige computers that have yellowed over time. Apparently coat it, wrap it completely in cellophane so it's airtight, and then expose it to the sunlight for hours, flip more hours of sunlight. Apparently what this product does is take these machines and make them look off the shelf brand new, but it doesn't harm it. It's not like bleaching it or something like that. It keeps everything intact. I've never done that, and if I had toy machines to experiment with, I'd consider trying it out, but I'm not going to try that experiment on this machine. Plus, it was a beige machine, and it looks kind of like I remember it looking. If it has yellowed with some age, I can't tell because there's no like splotches, or anything like that anywhere on the casing parts, but so no retrobrighting. And then finally, the processor. I am not changing out the processor. I'm keeping the original LC version of the chip, which I will get into that in another segment, because Macintoshes of this era, some of like the Power Macintosh 62 and some of the other Performas and stuff, all the parts in them were completely swappable because they were built on the same design. I'm not doing that because I want to keep this as the Performa 635 that I had. I don't want to take some LC parts and Power Mac parts and Frankenstein it. I want it to be an actual Performa 635, not a I want to say Hackintosh, but not a Frankenstein Mac in a 635 case. But that said, a lot of the other components are getting replaced, refreshed, etc. So bear with me. If you do happen to hang out with me, as I call it, watching my videos, that's really cool. I appreciate it. But let's see what happens. All right, so real quick here, I'll just flash a few photos from my library of my before pics, so to speak. You can see how unbelievably, look, there's Zeke. That fat dust bunny's name is Zeke. So how nasty this machine was on the inside, and really the pictures aren't even doing it justice. Truthfully, other than some of the larger floating dust bunnies, this stuff, compressed air wasn't touching it. Pretty much every component, every bit of this machine has had my hands on it, so to speak. Lots and lots of time and Q-tips to get all this nastiness straightened out. Yep, as I said earlier, I wish I would have started making some of my videos a bit sooner. Still at work on the fan, and then just some napkins for wiping up some of the stuff that falls, and a mountain of Q-tips, and I'm using glass cleaner because I clean everything with glass cleaner. I'm holding this thing with both hands and just spending time in there getting the edges and working on these blades. And since my hand is holding the camera, the focus can't quite get it, huh? Nasty, just nasty. And that is how I've done most of my machine, including when I took the power supply out of there. But one phase on the way. Movie magic. Now all of a sudden we are all perfectly nice and fresh and clean, every bit of it. Thank goodness. This was so bad that compressed air wouldn't even touch it. I had to definitely do it all by Q-tip. That's better. Lovely. Now to get her back. We're down a sec to get that slotted back into place. Now, that's better. Now, obviously, I've got all the plates off and stuff. I have already done the cleaning. This was about the time I decided to start the video. Excluding that fan, that was the last thing I did specifically for a before and after picture. But compared to how just nasty this puppy was, look at it now. Power supply has been thoroughly cleaned out. Every square inch of the fan, video card, everything I could get to. I mean, I had this bit of the assembly completely out, the power supply out, in order to get to it. And of course, Apple with their slick little slide-out motherboard, which is right here. How perfectly clean. The only thing I've yet to find a replacement for is the PRAM battery, but that'll happen eventually. And there's the processor. This crippled version of the 608040. I'm going to be talking about that soon enough, because I have some stuff I want to get into with that. But yep, still a perfectly healthy motherboard and a totally clean system. So now we will move on to the hardware that I'm adding to it. This is exciting. Okay, how are you folks doing? So, another upgrade that's going to happen. It's not a big one. It's an unfortunate circumstance, really, but I want to talk about the CD-Rom drive. This CD-Rom drive is what came in this computer, which is a 2X, drive. The unfortunate thing about the optical drives here is that we're dealing with that unusual mess of a SCSI. We have a 50-pin SCSI. Because of that, my options for actually putting a different drive in here were limited. If this had a more standard type of IDE channel, set of pins, I could probably make it work. But I cannot. I'm limited to finding a SCSI style of drive in order to upgrade this, and that's pretty difficult. Some of them I've seen were going for hundreds of bucks on eBay, and we're not going with that. So I am, however, able to upgrade this. The reason that I'm very limited and can't stick any optical drive in there is that 50-pin SCSI thing. And while there is such a thing as 50-pin adapters, I'm afraid it can't work in this Macintosh. And the reason would be because this here, I'm holding it upside down from me so you know, but this is the slot where the optical drive goes in. The drive tray faces out that way. This connector here is terminated right there. And then the other end of this cable is terminated into the motherboard slot. And what I mean is if you look back in there, that slot that runs all the way across the machine, trying to move the cables and hold the phone, difficult. So yes, this is how the motherboard actually hooks up to the system. It slots in on the end. Grab that puppy real quick. Like so. The motherboard hooks up that way. Slides in. So, with that said, since the cables are terminated on both ends, my options for adapters and things are pretty much cut off. As a matter of fact, inside the drive, where you have the pins and all that, and the Molex power, hooks up with this. This goes in, and then this right here slots in to that. So very limited. I basically have to find it. If I was going to replace the CD-ROM drive, it has to be a SCSI drive. They're very expensive, stupid expensive for what they are. However, I did find one for a decent price that is a bit of an upgrade from a later Macintosh. So I'm going from the 300i Plus to the 600i. I think this is an 8X drive. I'm not 100% sure. It may be 4 or 6X. I don't really know. I couldn't find a good spec sheet on this. I think it's an 8X though. But regardless, it's still a later drive. In fact, 95, 93, 2 years later. So it's a small but worthwhile upgrade. Yeah. Welcome to the family, sir. All right. So upgrade number 1 that I want to show off. First, this system came with a total of 12 megabytes of RAM. Whoa. Yes, it had 4 megabytes that are soldered onto the motherboard, and then one single slot for RAM, which at the time was this bad boy right here, 8 megabytes, giving me a total of 12 megs of system memory. Thanks to a fine group of folks, a company called Memory Masters on eBay. Out of the package here. We are now upgrading to 32 megs, which is the maximum that the RAM slot on this board can handle. The fact that I can still get 72-pin SIM at all is pretty impressive. But yep, so we're maxing out the memory to 36 megabytes of RAM, which I did not have when I was a kid, and I can't imagine what this upgrade would have cost back in that time. But definitely out with the old and in with the new. That should help System 7 run a little smoother. And another upgrade sitting here that I want to talk about are my adapters. Apparently this Griffin brand, which is actually a brand name, this adapter has better resolution capabilities than this super old 10-pin piece of crap here, which has had problems from time to time. But this will allow me to go from the old Apple display port to VGA, which I will then connect directly to a flat screen panel. So there's some upgrades. Let's see what else I got coming. All right, good morning. So I was just awakened from a doorbell because a post person arrived a little earlier this morning and had a package that the box wouldn't fit in my mailbox. So yay for me, another one of my Performa's upgrades have arrived, and this is kind of unique. Like, this is really cool in my opinion. I have the Ethernet card for my Performa. This was certainly not something that I had back in the day, and I don't believe these came standard in this particular line of Macs. Check it out. brand new, completely unused, sealed. I don't know if that's Farallon or Farallon or however that's pronounced. But this card hooks up to the Apple LC-PDS slot, which if you've never seen these before, these slots were introduced in the Macintosh LC computers back before, and they're often referred to as the LC-PDS slot. PDS standing for Processor Dependent Slot Connector, or PDS. Sort of the, you know, predates PCI and all that kind of stuff. This was one way, you know, these comm slots or communication slots were how you installed these. Anyways, yep. Next upgrade in line, fresh Ethernet card. And it even comes, these are still, as of making these videos, this guy, or the store that sells these, still has bunches of them in stock for about 20 bucks. Fresh spanking new floppy disk. I hope this disk is still good because it's still sealed. I have a external USB to floppy drive for my modern computer in case there were ever old floppies I needed to ever pull anything off of and back up, and this would be no exception. If not, I could probably find these on the Macintosh garden. But, yep, Ethernet. Alright, hello everybody. Looking at my next upgrade, which I finally got the little chip in the mail, and I'll get to that. Let's talk about these right here. So, the old school IDE channel hard drive that made that fantastic, crispy, crunchy sound when it would be reading and writing to the disk. 250 megabytes. This is what originally came in this Mac. Complete with that fantastic 40-pen IDE channel and Molex power. We are going to be replacing that with a spanking new solid state drive. That's something I did to my G4 over there once upon a time, and very thrilled to be able to do that to this old machine. And that is all, for those that have never seen them, thanks to what I've been waiting forever to get here. This nifty little device here will go from IDE and Molex power to SATA. And because of that, I will be able to slot this right in with this solid state drive. Now, why would you do this? All kinds of possible questions there. Some good things are obvious performance boosts. Now, how much really? Because one thing that, yes, solid state drives can transfer gigabytes of data per second, but unfortunately the IDE channel on the motherboard cannot. So a performance or speed bottleneck that this drive will just eat in abundance is the speed at which the IDE channel can carry data. But it's still going to be substantially faster in terms of boot time and performance and everything, because other than a far more reliable storage medium, you should understand that it's solid state, meaning that there is no drive spin up time, no seek time. Two things that were, you know, an obvious part of a mechanical platter drive is now toast. Instant, all bits will be instantly available. So I even got a mounting bracket there. The only thing I am going to have to do, I think, for mounting this is get some strips of foam, because to put on the top corners there to kind of balance what sits above it, because this had a bracket that I don't know how that's going to work yet, but I'll get it figured out eventually. But yep, going to solid state. Yay. All right. Can you see this? Because I tried to set my phone up before I went to grab it. It's finally here.
The guy actually just dropped it and left. Didn't even, he rang the doorbell, and I happened to have my phone in my hands at the time. So I fired up the camera real quick, and I thought I would catch it being delivered, but no, apparently not. My custom heatsink specifically for my Dear Max little Motorola chip has arrived. There it is. There it is. The custom heatsink specifically for my Performa's 33 megahertz CPU. I know it's ridiculous, but every little luxury that I can give this old girl. I wish I had time to install this today, but I don't, because I gotta go to work soon. But how cool. Alright, welcome back to Hanging with BitPusher. So, one final component that I want to talk about for a minute, and this will take me a few minutes and I will probably ramble, so you might want to skip it, but it would be the processor, the CPU. Before the IBM PowerPC processors became the standard in Macintoshes, they were previously powered by Motorola CPUs. The height of the Motorola CPUs was the 68040, as they called it, 68040. I like to say 68040 because I find that easier to, rolls off the tongue. But anyway, the 68040 was the full-blown Motorola chip in these Macs, whereas the Performa, my Performa, has the 68LC040. LC literally standing for low cost. With this being a budget Macintosh, more on the budget end, it had a budget chip to lower the cost further. So why was the LC the budget chip? Well, let's talk about that for a second. It was the low cost or LC Motorola chip because that particular version of the chip did not have an FPU or MMU built into the chip. FPU standing for floating point unit, which was part of the chip that handled floating point calculations, and the MMU or memory management unit, which handles like data caching, and I think controls like virtual memory if you use that and stuff. So more affordable Mac. I'm sure that was a contributing factor into how my parents got this for me as a kid. But anyway, this chip with its beautiful ceramic body, similar to the earlier Intel chips like the 386 and 486 processors they were using in DOS Windows PCs back then, only need passive cooling. The particular chip in my Performa runs at a smoking 33 megahertz. Produces slightly less than 5 watts of heat. So that said, passive cooling is pretty much what does the job. The fan that's in the top of the case blows air out, not in. And that keeps air moving a little bit inside the machine, and that's all it needed to stay cool. Now, when the machine's running, if you are running this Mac for a while and then slide the main board out and just feel it, the processor gets pretty toasty, but it's not nearly hot enough to damage itself or damage the motherboard. So passive cooling was sufficient. But I have a little luxury that I'm going to be adding. Wasn't totally necessary. It's not totally necessary by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a luxury. And we can define a luxury, yes. Let's agree on the definition of a luxury is something that is pleasurable, something that's nice to have, but not necessary, not truly required to function, right? So check this out.
Okay, so I have I cut some printer paper and tried to kind of tuck it under all the edges of where the die gets seated, just in case the slightest little drip might happen to come out, because thermal paste spreads really quickly. But I got my heat sink, and this, I have wiped the surface of these with an isopropyl alcohol wipe that came with my Arctic Silver, which is right here. And now I'm going to apply the thermal paste and do my first actual upgrade install. Well, second, because I stuck my RAM chip in, but going to go ahead and heat sink my chip. Right now it should be spreading under there. This thing is perfectly sized. Push down. Alright, next step. I have removed the plastic plate from the back, and now I can install my Ethernet card, which will slot right into the PDS slot here. So we'll do that. And there we go. Alright, with that now, ready to roll. Look at that. Super cool. Now I can install the motherboard back into the system. There are these plastic slotted rails attached in the case that you slot the grooves of the side into so that the motherboard makes the connection to that rail in the back properly. There we go. And we are in business. If I had the card, I could also install a TV tuner here, but we don't hook up to television that way in the last, decade and a half or so. So anyway, there we are. Next. All right, next step is I have taken my 600i, replacing the old 300i, and I've installed my drive caddy here and this kind of SCSI and Molex bridge. Now I can slot this back into the case. See how I'm lifting up and it's not moving? The lines are now locked in to the case for this caddy, so that's a win. And just like that, good to go. Alright, so next, now I can slot my drive caddy into the grooves that are in the case for this thing. Then you could use this tab that's on the front to pop the drive out if you needed to, but it goes in like so. Locked in. And the old solid state drive. I'm just gonna pop that puppy down in there. There. That thing is by no stretch of the imagination moving anywhere. So there we go. Connected. All right. Next step is to reinstall the floppy disk drive, which unfortunately there's no real upgrade I can do for that since a floppy drive is just a floppy disk drive. They all kind of read and write at the same speed for these. But I thought I would have to cut some custom foam pieces to slot right above the hard drive there because that fat hard drive is no longer there. But I hadn't really paid attention to the fact that it's got this caddy will basically just right above the drive slot in there and keep this thing locked into place. So I guess that's one step I won't have to come up with. So I'm gonna put that back in. There we go. And then before I push it all the way in, you got to hook the cable back up because you don't want to do it out here because it doesn't reach far enough. And if you push the caddy all the way back in, it's against the wall of the case, or part of the case, so you can't. So get that put together. And good and solid. All right, how silly of me. I was about to start slapping my case back together and I forgot to put the hard drive cover plate thing back on. So I'll stick that back in there real quick. There we go. That's better. All right, just making a quick bit. Last thing I did before I left the house today, when I got my floppy drive installed and all that, I was really itching to fire it up and give it a test run, my Mac a test run, but I never got the chance. Now that I'm finally done with this long day at work, I can get home and fire it up. I'm excited. I just hope it doesn't fail. Slapping on some of the case pieces, and then I realized that maybe I should test it first because I don't know how this main board is going to talk with this new RAM chip, if the IDE to SATA converter is going to work, if that CD-ROM drive is any good, just etc. So this is it. I'm trying to sit from a mile from my computer so I can film my screen, and then got the original discs, well, some of them anyway. I used to use some of these in school, like the encyclopedia there and some other things. I used this to help me write some of my school stuff. Anyway, oh, and who in the world can forget that one? Where in the world is Carmen SanDiego? Anyways, I got my Performa CD that I've had for flipping ever. I can't wait to try this. So I'm gonna fire it up. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah. Oh, wait a minute. All right, we're live. That is a good sign. That just means that there's no operating system. Obviously, it's a brand new solid state drive. So, I'm gonna pop in the disk. The restore CD, please work. And there we go. You must boot while holding down the C key. That's something that still works from, that has worked from back then, clear up through modern Macs now. That's a good sign as well. Oh, I think we're in business. Generally around that point, you'd have seen the sad Mac with some kind of error code, but so far so good. Hell yes. .33 megahertz loading an entire operating system into RAM. That's pretty funny. Look at her go, man. This is working. Oh, you don't say. This disk is unreal. Look at that. It sees my solid state drive right off the rip. I can't believe it can see that much. So it's 120 gig solid state drive. I wasn't for sure if this main board would see more than 40, but look at that. Let's see if it actually goes here. Ah, my baby, you are alive and well. This is badass. I think some of the longer parts, especially as I try to install the operating system here, I will edit a little bit to cut down some of the time. In fact, I'll do that now. Alright guys, so it failed. As you saw, disk initialization failed. I thought I was perhaps sunk, because I had read that certain like really early versions of these IDE SCSI, the main boards didn't work so well with the IDE to SATA adapters. But I'm going to keep recording here because I may have found another solution. And I'm just going to try it on film and see if this works. If not, then this has been an educational experience and we'll see what else I can do, because I know there's compact flash cards and SD converters that can work in place of these as well, but I really wanted an actual solid state drive, like a proper SSD. But so what I'm going to try next is I burned a copy of System 5 7.5.3. The one on my restore CD is pure 7.5, not 7.5.1 or any of the updates that run in System 7. The stock system's hard drive partitioning tool is very basic, and I had read that it doesn't necessarily work very well compared to what the next tool that they call Drive Setup. This was within 10 minutes of researching the subject, because that's the first thing I did is hopped online. So I'm gonna pop this 7.5.3 update disk in and boot from there and see what actually happens. The highest version of the operating system that this Performa can run is 7.5.5, but the installers on Macintosh Garden are not bootable. So I burned them, and if this works, then I'll be able to update to the final possible version of System 7. It had to be a PowerPC Performa to run 7.5.6 and an OS 8 and possibly OS 9.0. I read about it. Let's see what it's like in practice. I wondered if this was an issue about the clock not having been set, but the control panel to do it doesn't exist right now. Now, I had read that this was not the way to go, so we're going to immediately cancel that. Yep, 7.5.3. Now on 7.5, this was the hard drive setup tool, and this one did not exist. This one I'm familiar with. I've used it a lot in OS 9, but I was kind of surprised to see that this version of the hard disk tool actually went back this far. But I've really got my fingers crossed right now. Because I've got other options, yes, but I really wanted this option. I put SSDs in my Macs, and this one I really wanted that. That'd have been great. Alright. So it sees it. Type IDE, that's a win. I'm just going to let it do what it wants to do. This disk is too big to be used up by a single. Can optimize disk usage by canceling this dialog and choosing a partitioning scheme with several volumes. I'm curious. Oh, maybe that's the issue. Maybe you can only see 8 gigabytes at a time. This I'm not familiar with at all. Apple free. I've never seen that before. I don't need 120 gigs of space. I'll never use it, but I have to give this a try. I don't know if I can rename from here or not. I think I have to do it once it actually creates these on the desktop. That's how it works in OS 9. I'll go with 2 partitions. Macintosh, HFS. I can go clear up to 8. It breaks them down. I think I am limited by my main board's capacity to talk to this drive. I don't know how the other tool saw 111 gigs, but it couldn't communicate with it. But I'm going to guess, based off that warning dialogue, that this might be the situation. I really hope. Oh, that was fast. Look at this. I think I win. Now, when I bought my solid state drive, I was not expecting it to be able to use the whole 120 gigs. I wasn't sure about that. But this, I think I'm in the house, guys. Oh, I didn't realize I had that locked in. All right, let's do this. Thank goodness, man. This was not freaking funny. Yeah, please.
But give me a break, man. We did not have drives of this capacity available back when I was a freaking middle school kid. And certainly not solid state drives. I mean, what I've done here as far as putting in a solid state drive in this Mac is extremely unorthodox anyway. Oh, you beautiful, beautiful device. I'll install everything now. Okay, yes. That was a thing. Definitely don't want the control strip. Always hated that. Whatever else came with it, we'll just do it. I don't think I want that. No, I guess it won't hurt. Give me everything you got. Disk space of it. Oh, I love this, man. This is just beautiful. Let me have a look at this. Oh, one other thing I wanted to see. There it is. All 36 megabytes of RAM, the maximum that this machine can possibly take. That has to feel good. So that was the whole problem. Yep, that the old school partitioning or drive setup tool couldn't talk to this disk. It didn't know what it's too big for this thing to handle. I don't know how I read it. It recognized it, but I think we're good now. Thank goodness, man. What a freaking relief, God. All right. Well, I'm gonna let this get through the process, and hopefully it doesn't fail. I will edit this and cut, try to save some time again if possible. But I wanted to bring it back real quick just to throw some of this in. Remember, if you are watching this, people, I did mention this is more my vlog than a reference or how-to video. So for my own, journaling ideas or memories or however you want to look at it, I want to see some of this. Because someday I probably won't be able to. Who knows how much life I can actually keep in this machine over the years as we continue to roll here. Eventually I will have to have the capacitors done. I'm glad they all look so healthy right now. I will, of course, I'll cut this and I'll bring it back when the installer is close to complete. Alright. Now we are back in business. That's a beautiful sight to see. I never understood what that meant. A lot of Mac software says that if you wish to do additional installations. I don't get why you would do that, but okay. Alright, let's give this a run and see what happens. Pop the CD out. Hell yes. Oh, thank goodness. What a relief. Holy smokes. My computer did not boot near that fast when I was... Alright, I think we are live and well with an actual solid state drive at the helm. I'm gonna let that happen. Alright. Well, let me make myself at home. Gotta have a green trash can for, you know, Oscar the Grouch. I seem to be limited to 640 by 480. I think that's the best this old girl can do, which is fine. I don't care, I'm just happy it works. Oh, might be a good time to fix this. If I can, I might have to lie. I don't think this goes up high enough. This won't work. I think I'm gonna have to lie. I want to see what it'll do. Well, it goes backwards but not forwards. This was, I know this was pre Y2K and all that. So I'm gonna say it's, well, let's go to my time in life. We'll call it 95 here with this machine. The actual time is something like that. We'll say, yeah, work afternoon shift. What do you expect? There. Still wants to use virtual memory. I'm not a fan. I did max out the system. I don't believe that's necessary. I think I'll increase the cache a bit. That's a tad better, I suppose. Seems to make no difference. Oh, that's actually better. Looks a little cleaner. Yep, that is my max resolution. I am stuck at 640 by 480. At least I can get thousands. Alright. I'm alive. My system as well. Let's play. I'm going to make this video stupidly long by going even further and playing with it now. Since it's handy. I have to find a copy of ClarisWorks. That was my jam in middle school. And I still have my Steve Jobs and Apple presentation that I did on this very Performa back then. I'm going to run this just to show off the system working, if it can. I don't remember what version this needed for. This is well suited for your system. I have 36 megabytes of physical RAM. The system is running quick draw. My system has a 250. Yeah, I would say so. My system is based on the 6800 architecture. Likes it. I love how fast stuff copies and moves around. That's great. Yes, sir. A lot of these old games did make you do that. I remember having to do that quite a bit. Oh, that stupid control strip. Greetings, Gumshoe. This is so cool. Man.
Hello and welcome to Acme. I'm the Chief, but you can call me, well, the Chief. We're in the business of tracking down people.
It's good to see you again, Chief.
Carmen SanDiego. Every creep we've ever collared has been working for her. Now, when you report for duty, I assign you a case. You go to the scene of the crime and look for clues about where the crook took the loot. Then the chase begins. Any bystander is a potential witness who can point you in the right direction. When you finally catch up with the crook, you've got to bust him. But remember, you can't arrest the crook without a warrant. And you can't get a warrant if you don't know what the crook looks like. Now, I could tell you lots more, but the best way to learn a job is on the job. So, are you ready for your first case?
Yes, Chief.
Gumshoe, the folks in Korea are itching to see you, because somebody swiped their kimchi. They eat that tangy cabbage concoction alongside virtually every meal. But this morning, someone stole the recipe. Soul food just won't be the same till you get the recipe back. Go to it.
That's right. 33 megahertz, 36 megs of RAM, high definition 640 by 480 graphics at an astounding VGA. Guys, I'm just overwhelmed. This is so damn cool. I feel like an old man now, because it wasn't even that long ago. But Digi-sketch. Alright, rather than sit and play this all day, which I probably will at some point, let me step out of here. I wish I could convey the amount of memories I have with this. Oh, man. So good. Thank you. Alrighty. I want to drop one final note here before I finish putting my case back together, now that we know everything works, is that this thing is definitely warm. Not hot, but warm. So this heatsink is definitely doing its job. It's dissipating heat off the chip. And I love the fact that it's working so well. With that fan blowing, pulling air directly up from it, since it sits right above this processor, this is a win. All right, my long journey has finally reached its end. My middle school Mac, the Performa 635, lives again. It's been a hell of a journey. It's just really been a long journey for me. Just the amount of time I had to sit cleaning every nook and cranny of this thing, impatiently waiting for bits and pieces at a time to come in the mail, and just all that. And it's alive and well. Now, if you think my love of my childhood and love of the old Macintosh and all that has been really cringy, other than I remind you that this is my type of vlog, then there is one final step that I have to suggest for the longevity and for the well-being of your classic Mac, your vintage Macintosh. I don't mean classic Macs and Mac Classic. Anyway, the final step is you have to take your Macintosh, okay? You look at it, you have all those years memories past, face it upright like so, okay? Kindly put your arms around it and hug it. Close your eyes, hug it, and just be very happy that it's alive. Yes. Yeah. Love your Mac. I guess this is the kind of thing that, you know, I've said this type of stuff before. It's really hard to explain to someone younger, this generation, how you could value and love a machine so much. Because, you know, machines, computers, and smartphones and all that are so commonplace for this generation and so normal. You could try to explain it all day and they would have no concept of a time when the stuff was not quite as normal. I mean, you know, I can remember times when it was ridiculous to have a computer at home. Like, why would you do? No one really was into that, and they were stupidly expensive to boot. I mean, even when I was in middle school, they were expensive, but at least they were a little more common. I was just at the cusp of, you know, how do I put it? I was at the right time and place when I was born to have come up to where computers became a normal thing. And then, so back in that time, you know, computers were a special thing. For people that love technology, being able to use a computer and have a computer was a special thing. Because whereas now, literally anything you can conceive anywhere in the world, connecting to anywhere in the world and doing anything, you can actually slide it out of your pocket and go. And it's always with you. And if you're used to that from birth, then the idea of having a machine that does these things and not having it everywhere you go, every day in your life, it's a whole different time and place. And there's no explaining it. I cannot choose the right combination of words to get the younger generation to understand the concept of life without computers everywhere you go. So to grow up with them from my generation, I mean, there's always, to some people, they're just tools and they're that. The other people's, they're a more special experience. When, you know, my computers impacted every single day of my life, enabled me to do a lot of things that some people couldn't do or weren't doing. And I don't know. Like I said, there's no combination of words I could choose, but she lives. This thing is alive and well. I made it happen, and I'm very happy. I've got a lot of memory reliving to do. I want to give a shout out to the fine folks who host and contribute to Macintosh Garden. That website, if you're not familiar, hosts from A to Z every single piece of vintage Macintosh software they can get. From software that ran on the original Macs, or the original, I'm trying to think, I don't remember if they have Apple II software on there or whatnot. Never really looked. But anyway, regardless, from the original Macintosh on, anything that ever existed on any sort of floppy disk or CD-ROM, if they can get it, they've probably got it. I've used them a lot for my OS 9 machine, for my
well, a lot of my machines, but in this case, I'll be able to get ClarisWorks back and some of the old games I have. I used to have, I still have some of them. That binder of stuff that I've had forever has some software too. But anyways, if you actually watched this whole thing and hung out with me, or if you skipped to this part and happen to be watching, thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for watching. This is what a normally depressed human being looks like when he is brought out of that bubble he's usually in and very happy, because this is just making my heart scream. I'm so thrilled that this thing is alive. It's like, you know, reclaiming a piece of your childhood that meant a lot to you, that was a very happy time in your life, because we can't get that stuff back as we get older. But the hard work is paid off. Bit Pusher's out. See ya.
Quack.